right now we have 4 zones, right? And that has changed, but we've had 4 for quite some time.
This week on Kentucky Afield, we went live on Facebook to answer all of your fall hunting questions. And we're bringing you those answers right now. It's all next on Kentucky Afield.
Such a pretty fish.
Beautiful.
This pond is plumb loaded with frogs.
They're everywhere in here. Yeah, this is a good fish right here. Really good fish.
Come here, girl.
Yeah, boy. That's a big rabbit.
Nice job. Yes! Yes! My first muskie.
Mercy, Leo.
Yeah, look at it. It's a keeper.
Here it goes. Boom.
Wow, that happened fast.
Hello and welcome to Kentucky Afield. I'm your host, Chad Miles. Thank you for tuning in tonight for our annual hunting question and answer show. We're coming to you live from the Salado Wildlife Education Center. And as always, I have a panel of experts here to answer all of your questions. Joining me today, I have John Hast, who is the Deer, Bear, Elk Program Coordinator. Good to see you, John.
Thank you.
We also have Cody Roden, who is the small game biologist. I think I mispronounced your name, Cody Roden, right?
Got it, yeah, no problem.
Good to see you again, Cody. This is actually your second time doing this show, right?
That's correct, yep, excited to be here.
Answering all of our law enforcement questions, we have Officer Robin Martinez. She works Washington County and other areas of the 4th District. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, happy to be here.
And today is your first time on the call-in show, so we're very, very glad to have you. All right, coming up first, we've got, let's see, question number 1 is from David Sizemore. It says, so much effort has been made to improve big game hunting. He wants to know what's being done to improve habitat for rabbit and quail. Cody?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for asking it. So in the small game program, so we take care of the rabbit, squirrel, and quail in the state. And one of the big things we focus on is habitat. So making more habitat for these animals to be able to exist in more usable space across the state. And so one exciting thing we have going on are our focus areas across the state in which we're working with private working lands to try to get those individuals that farm or raise livestock to do some small changes to their operations to make some of their landscape more usable for small game like rabbits and quail. And small game used to be kind of a byproduct of farming. If we think about the 60s and 70s, the times of greatest abundance for some of these animals, it was a direct result from the way people use the land. And so one of the things we're doing in the small game program is trying to get in and talk to private landowners and try to get them to do some things a little bit differently, to try to tweak some of their operations to get quail and rabbits back to the numbers that they were historically.
It's interesting. We have small game biologists on all the time, and it seems like every single time we're going to get a question about what can I do to see more wildlife on our property. And almost every single time the answer is do less,
Exactly.
mow less, spray less.
100%.
It's not, your farm is not bad if it's got a little bit of weeds around a fence post. I mean, let it grow up, let it grow a little wider, do a little bit less work on the property, and you'll probably see more benefits of wildlife.
Exactly, yeah, that's a great point. And again, if we think back to when small game were their most abundant, it was when, the bush hog didn't exist. It was when people didn't have the time or technology really to clear out every square inch of their farm. And it comes back to just generating more usable space. So we don't have to have, premier quail or rabbit habitat out there. We just need more marginal habitat for these animals, just more cover for them to exist in. And we're confident that if we can kind of get people to change how they use and view the land, we'll be in a much better place as far as small game goes, and a lot of other ground nesting songbirds and things along those lines.
All right, next question is from John Murner, and it says, how long do fawns stay with their does? That's an interesting question, because the hunting season is coming up really soon. How long they stay with them versus how long they're dependent on them is a much different question. So
absolutely.
Let's answer both of these questions if you don't mind.
I was going to start, and really the dependence question. So we had a great deer research project a couple years ago that we did with the University of Kentucky, and we caught does in the winter. We caught the fawns that they had in May and June and had all that radio collared. We knew where mom was, we knew where the fawn was. And what surprised me is we had multiple fawns that were getting, mom might get hit on the road, a couple different reasons, where those does were dying in June and July, and those fawns lived, into the end of the season. We tracked them as long as we could until their collars died. So dependency is one of those things that usually the general rule is they get to July, August, they're fine on their own. Definitely as we get into September in the archery season, those fawns are completely able to live on their own at that point.
Now, if a doe, something happens to a doe, disease, predation, whatever, road, and it has a couple fawns, I know some mammals, another female may be able to start raising those. Does that happen with deer at all?
Yeah, I'd say it'd be pretty rare. I mean, usually at that point they're eating solid food, they're not nursing anymore, and they're just able, if they're in good habitat, they're able to take care of themselves.
They can just take off, yeah. So, all right, that's dependence.
Right.
Deer run in groups. Does get together. It's hard to tell which one's a fawn and which one's a mother once they get a little bit of age. But they may be together off and on for years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They'll run the button bucks off as you get into October, and the rut kicks up there in November. But they're still living in loose family groups.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Next question here. Gary Devine Jr. Is there anything special that I need to hunt on the part of Nolan WMA that is owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers but managed by Fish and Wildlife? Who wants to answer this question?
I can take that one.
Okay.
So no, there's nothing special that you'd have to do, just your normal statewide regulations. If you're deer hunting at the most liberal zone, will qualify for that part of the WMA, and then if you're going to trap it, you need to get written permission from the biologist that works that area.
Yeah, they don't ask what type of hunting they're wanting to do, but so if you just want to hunt deer hunt it or turkey hunt it, then there's no special requirements at all, right?
Nope.
Next question is from Shorty Dunaway. I rabbit hunt with dogs and want to know if it's legal to take my dogs to public land and train them in the off season. I think that's another law enforcement question. Is that legal to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can jump in a little bit on that one as well. So it is legal to go out and train them. What we usually tell people is if there's a season that's going on in which you could chase game with a dog, then you're okay to go out there with any dog, whether it's a rabbit dog, a quail pointing dog, or something like that. And so the most wide open season we have is squirrel season, and so that came in August 21st, and we'll go out in February. And so if you're on those areas and you have a dog, you can have them unleashed at those points in time. As far as training them, you can't release animals on WMAs. Transporting live wildlife and things along those lines are a no-no. But if you just want to go out there and run your dog off leash, then our WMAs are good places to do that.
Now, is that something you need to have a hunting license to do that?
Yes, you should have a hunting license to do that.
Okay.
Because again, you're operating under the assumption that you're out there pursuing game in which you could pursue with the aid of dogs, which squirrel is definitely one of those game animals.
Okay, all right. There you go. There's a good spot to work your squirrel dogs or your rabbit dogs or whatever. You got bird dogs, I guess. All right, next question is from Matt King. Why doesn't rabbit season come in later statewide like in Western Kentucky? So Western Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky have a split zone for rabbit season. Tell me a little bit about those dates and then why that is the case.
Yeah, so that's another great question and one that we receive quite a bit. And it's also the same for our quail season. So there's two different zones, the western zone, which comes in after deer firearm season, and the eastern zone, which comes in November 1st. And so the eastern zone ends January 31, the western zone ends in the middle of February, or February 10th. And so the reasons for that, the law was changed way before I got to Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and I've heard many different iterations about why that was. And at this point, kind of from a small game program standpoint, we've been trying to kind of hold the line and keep them more conservative, especially in the eastern zone, because we're not really sure how the rabbit resource could handle hunting later in the season. So sometimes if you do hunt a lot of rabbits and you're out there hunting in January in the western zone or the eastern zone, and you kick up two rabbits underneath the same bush, it's likely those animals were thinking about maybe breeding. And so what we don't want to do from a resource standpoint is harvest either one of those animals because they've made it. They've made it past the winter. They didn't get depredated, they didn't get harvested, and they could make more smaller rabbits for us to hunt in the next hunting season. And so there's states around us, like Ohio, for example, that do allow their hunters to take rabbits all the way to the end of February, February 28th. And so our rabbit population is experiencing long-term declines, so is theirs. But their rabbit population, for whatever reason, appears to be declining at a faster rate. And we think it might have something to do with the fact that they have their season open until February 28th, whereas we cut our season off at the latest in the western zone on February 10th. And so again, with a lot of these questions and things, as a division, as a program, we're trying to be the most conservative we can, but also allow people as much opportunity as possible. And one of the things that we try to do with that is kind of hold the line there on those conservative seasons.
A lot of questions about rabbit hunting. You're going to be busy today. The very next question.
Good deal.
Charles Harp wants to know when rabbit season starts. So we talked about the western zone was after deer season.
After the first weekend of modern firearms. So I believe that's November 13th.
We'll get that exact date. The eastern zone, when does that season start?
It starts November 1st.
November
Yeah,
1st.
for
But in
quail
the
and
eastern
rabbit.
zone, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, rabbit season goes out for the open 2 days of firearm season. Is that correct?
That's
deer
correct.
season.
Yep,
so
that
the
is
first 2
correct.
days of opening modern firearm deer season, rabbit season is closed
Statewide, yep.
statewide. And then when it comes back out, then all of them open up at that point in time statewide. It's open.
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And that again goes back to trying to develop the most opportunity for our sports people in the Commonwealth.
I'll tell you what, Cody. I don't know if you know this about me, but I am a rabbit hunter. I absolutely love to rabbit hunt. I have beagles, and all my rabbit hunting buddies tell me how many rabbits we're seeing this year.
Oh my
so do you? I know people talk about the cyclical nature of rabbits. What's going on this year, and what should we expect? What are you seeing?
Another great question. And as much as I'd like to take all the credit for that, it does kind of go back to the cyclical nature, which I'm glad you touched on that. So small game in Kentucky, rabbits and quail, specifically squirrels for the most part kind of trend evenly throughout the years. They'll go up and down, squirrels will with the mass crop. But rabbits and quail, for whatever reason, experience these broad 7-year cycles. So they'll go from a peak down to a trough and then back up to a peak in 7 years. And so for whatever reason, we haven't quite pinpointed that. It's interesting that we don't really know why that is at this point. It probably has something to do with weather or something along those lines. But the good news is right now we're experiencing kind of we should be around the peak for both rabbits and quail at this point in time. And we've had pretty mild winters minus some hard February freezes the last 2 winters. I don't know if you guys remember that earlier in the spring. We had some weird freezing, and I was kind of worried about that, but it looks like they've rebounded pretty well. We've had a really good growing season. Some heavy rain events, but nothing that has swamped out enough nests to make a big difference. And so 2 things, I guess. One, we're at that cyclical peak for both animals. And 2, we've had a really good growing season that we haven't experienced a lot of extreme weather that might affect their breeding.
All right, next question is from Danny White. If a youth turns 16 before the season has ended, do they need to purchase an adult license? That's interesting because what is the age? It doesn't say hunting or fishing. It just says if a youth turns 16 before the season is ended, do they need to purchase an adult license?
No, they don't. They're good until the following license year. It's 12 to 15 for the youth license, and then from 16 to 65, you get your resident or non-resident normal license.
So for fishing, when do you need to have a license if you're a youth?
Fishing is 16.
16, and if it's hunting, it is?
It's 12.
12. And you need that license, and you said if they turn 16, they can. If they've already purchased the youth license, they're good on that particular license?
Yes.
Okay. All right, there you go, Danny. There's your question. Next question, Joey Randolph. Why is the rabbit population so low? Joey's not hanging out with my buddies that are seeing big rabbits. But he also knows about the cyclical nature here because he's saying, I've been seeing it drop over 5 years.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about where do you think we're at in the 7-year trend? Best guess.
Yeah, so we should be approaching the peak for both. So kind of last year and the last few years for quail have been up. And so for quail, we should be up there. And then again, rabbits kind of follow a similar trend. which is one reason we think it might be something like weather or some other thing that's driving a statewide response. And that again, from the cyclic nature is up and down. That's based on a rural mail carrier survey route. So in the last week in July, we send out cards to rural mail carriers, so people that go around and deliver mail off the beaten path. And we ask those individuals to record how many quail and rabbits they saw in their daily routes. And so we have about 800 rural mail carriers participating in that. So if there's anyone watching that is a rural mail carrier, thank you so much for those data.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's been going on since the mid-'60s for both species. It's one of the robust indexes for small game in the Southeast. And so, you know, we refer to that as an index. So it's not hard and fast numbers about here's how many animals are here in this place at this point in time. It's more of an approximation, kind of we're keeping our finger on the pulse of small game populations in the state. And so that definitely doesn't capture kind of local population levels. So there could be a multitude of factors that might be affecting this individual's observations, which by all means he could be seeing a decline. I definitely don't argue against that. And these could be things like, you know, maybe the farmer cut his hay a little earlier than he did in the last few years, or maybe over the last few years people have been parceling out their farmland and building more houses and having more yards, you know. It could be a habitat issue, really. So I would challenge them to kind of look around and see if anything has changed in the last 5 years around them, or even on their bit of property that they're seeing the declines on. A lot of times when I talk to landowners, they say things like, you know, I've been on my farm for the last 60 years, you know, nothing's changed. You know, and they might own 100 acres or so, and they say the small game populations, you know, they keep going down. And one thing I challenge them, you know, nothing may have changed on your farm, that might be true, but, you know, take an aerial photograph from Google Earth from the late 90s and see what did change. I would almost be willing to guarantee stuff did change around your farm, and that really does matter to the population of animals. Not necessarily just the animals you see on your farm, but the animals around that farm, your neighboring farm, and it all combines to create usable space for animals through time.
I'll tell you what, if you have a farm and you've been managing for 60 years in the state of Kentucky, you may not think that things have changed, but just predators. I mean, how many coyotes did we have on the landscape in Kentucky 60 years ago? And now, predation is the number of birds. I mean, you see red-tailed hawks. You drive down the highway in January, and you look at the number on the power lines. I mean, they're everywhere, right?
Yeah, no
so
doubt.
a lot of external factors are definitely changing. That's for sure.
That's another good point.
Next question is from Mark Wang. He wants to know if he needs a deer and turkey permit to harvest either of those species on their own property.
No, so as long as he is the owner of the property, he is licensed and permit exempt.
Okay, all right. But he still has to abide by all the rules and regulations of the harvest rules.
Right.
And turkeys and in the fall.
They still have to be telechecked in, and a harvest log has to be made. But as far as buying the license and permit itself, he doesn't need to.
Next question is from Donna Pridemore. I want to know if they will change how many you can take in. They want to know if they're going to make any changes to how many deer can be harvested in Zone 4.
Yep. No, there's no plans to do that presently. I know we've had some deer down in Zone 4 due to an EHD outbreak we had in 2017, and we're seeing positive growth. It'll take us a few more years to get back where they were at, but we don't anticipate making any reg changes.
You know, I've had a biologist explain this to me a couple times. Right now we have 4 zones, right? And that has changed, you know, but we've had 4 for quite some time.
Yep.
We don't make changes to this every single year. It's hard to track trends that you want to make changes every few years. But the Zone 4, you got 4 zones. Zone 1 typically has the most deer, correct?
Yep. Too many.
Too many deer.
Yes. Yep.
So that's what I wanted you to go through and tell me the 4 zones and what those zones, as far as what biologists feel like is the appropriate amount of deer on the landscape and how that correlates to zones. Because I think that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And we really, the way I like to start is right in the middle. When you look at Zone 2 and 3, those are about right. That's, you know, deer per square mile for the habitat. 2 or 3 is sort of the target. When we get on the lower side of that, Zone 4, that's areas predominantly. If you look at a map of our Zone 4 counties, it is Appalachia, it is our predominantly forested counties. And that just doesn't have the ability to support as many deer as an ag county in central or west Kentucky. And so those deer take a little longer to bounce back from, something like an EHD outbreak. And on the flip side of that, you've got zone ones. And if you look at those counties, that's predominantly big row crop agriculture. That's sort of north central Kentucky. I'm thinking Scott County, Owen County, kind of mixed ag, places known for the numbers of deer. Roadkill collisions are through the roof, that kind of deal. And we're actively trying to make zone ones, get them back down to the level of a 2. And so in that, we've basically got unlimited doe harvest. So you can kill 4 on your initial license and buy an additional deer permit, as many of those as you want, and harvest as many deer as you want, to actually reduce that population. A lot of that has to do with row crop agriculture, with vehicle collisions, but basically too many deer.
The interesting thing is some people hear that, oh my gosh, you can take as many as you want.
Yeah.
Hunters just don't, do they?
Correct.
I mean, most hunters, they take their 1 deer, they may take 2. If you start looking at the percentage of people that hunt, even if they bow hunt all year, people don't necessarily go out and hunt just to fill the freezer with meat. They go out there because they enjoy hunting. They enjoy being out there. They enjoy seeing the wildlife. Yeah, they want to take a deer, but the number of people that take more than 4 deer a year is pretty slim, isn't it?
Oh, it's very slim. The number of people that take 2. I mean, our average successful hunter takes 1.4 deer, so about 1.5. I fall firmly in that category. I don't know, actually lower than that. I don't think I've had a year that I've taken 2. Take 1, put it in the freezer, and that's where it's at. We've got some avenues, Kentucky Hunters for the Hungry. That's a great way, if you're in the Zone 1 county, to take that extra deer and do good with it.
Yeah. Hunters for the Hungry is a great program. I know if you've watched Kentucky Field, you've seen us donate deer to Kentucky Hunters for the Hungry. Just make sure that you reach out to those processors and make sure they're taking deer, put a plan together, but get out there in them little Zone 1 counties where there's a whole lot of deer.
Absolutely.
You want to spend a little time in the tree stand, maybe that very first time you draw that bow back or you pull that gun and put it to your shoulder, it doesn't have to be your buck tag for the year. Get out there and take a doe or 2 and put it in the freezer or put it to good use. So I highly recommend that. Next question is from Brian Keller. When do you dove hunt at Taylorsville WMA? Anybody have any ideas about when dove season at Taylorsville WMA opens up?
It's got a field that opens tomorrow, the 1st.
Okay.
But I also think there's a youth field. So that's one of those things where, checking out the Dove Guide is critical on those properties.
Okay. You can check out the Dove Guide, or I'll tell you what, always a great resource is reaching out and calling our info line. They have all this information, 1-800-858-1549. If you have any questions that you need to get answered, call that info helpline. They are really good about reading that guide and helping you out. So 1-800-858-1549. Buddy Arnold, can a disabled person use a crossbow during the archery season the entire time for deer?
There is a permit they can go online and get printed out. They take it to their doctor and get it filled out and send it back in, and they can have a permit to do that, which if you're under 15 or over 65, you can do that anyways.
So if you're over 65 and you want to use a crossbow from day 1 of archery season or under the age of, what was it again?
15.
Under the age of 15, you can use a crossbow from day 1 of archery season,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And so shooting a crossbow, anybody hunting with a crossbow right now? I'll tell you what, that's a pretty unique tool. You can get that crossbow out and become pretty proficient with it fairly quick, can't you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you practice with it, it's one of the most accurate weapons that I've ever handled in my life, for sure. It's incredible.
But I'll tell you what, some people don't like crossbows, and I'll tell you, I've been battling a shoulder issue. I am going to a vertical bow hunt this year, but we'll see how it goes for next year. I very well may be in a crossbow myself, but I bet your range is not any further than mine with a longbow.
Oh, no doubt, yeah.
How far do you feel like you can shoot a
accurately 40 yards.
40
Very
yards.
accurately, yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, crossbow, man, it's like a rifle. you're still shooting an arrow that's falling pretty fast, and you get out much about 40 yards, you're probably you're at the end of your effective kill range with it. So
I totally agree with that. And one thing I learned, I had not done any vertical bow hunting in the past, and one thing I did learn, past 40 yards, a lot can happen between the time you squeeze the trigger on the crossbow and by the time it makes contact with your target. So I had deer moving and stuff after I pulled the trigger, and they're not as quiet as you might think either. And so there's kits you can buy to silence them and stuff like that. But I will say, definitely err on the side of shorter yardage with the crossbow for sure, and to make an ethical kill with the animal.
Crossbows are, I'll tell you what, they're definitely here to stay, and for getting someone with a little smaller stature or an older person that may have shoulder issues like me, I'm getting up in my age, having a rough time pulling that bow. I tell you what, it's a great way to get somebody out in the field, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Next question is from Brandon Williams. If he's deer hunting over corn with a bow and see a turkey and he has turkey tags, can he take that turkey? Since he wasn't intentionally trying to bait for them, he was trying to get deer.
No, he cannot.
Yep, that's a hard no.
Yeah, you cannot hunt over bait for turkeys, even if it was meant for the deer. The turkeys are present in the bait, or the bait is having them in the area, then it's considered hunting over bait.
So I think the way it's actually worded is something about intentionally or unintentionally manipulating turkeys. So even if you know your neighbor is baiting them and it's manipulating the birds, you still can't hunt there either,
Correct.
right? So you got to be very, very cautious. If you're a person who wants to fall turkey hunt, you got to be very cautious on baiting using corn or anything like that to bring in deer, because it may affect your ability to turkey hunt that piece of property. So that's something you got to be real cautious with. Donnie Carroll, what are some quick tips for someone wanting to harvest an elk in Kentucky if they've never hunted them before? Are there any certain preparations? Man,
quick tips.
This is right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But, you want to elk hunt in Kentucky, there was a process of getting drawn. So at this point, if you have been drawn and you're planning on hunting, what's the first couple things that a potential elk hunter needs to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got the elk program did a webinar series this year. So if you're a drawn hunter, that'll all be on my profile. And it's not too late to go back and we basically walk you through the whole summer and throw in some tips, some hunting tips, some gear tips. We've got a show on bullet selection for rifles and archery gear for archery hunting elk. But I would say, we're coming, our elk archery season starts September 11th, so that's effectively a week and a half from now. I would think if you've got an elk tag, I would try to get out on Labor Day and do some scouting.
Yeah.
That's my number one suggestion to all of our elk hunters is get out there before the season. If only to learn the roads and, see the country in the daytime before you get out there the morning of your hunt. It's completely different. I grew up in West Kentucky, had no idea what East Kentucky looks like. So if you haven't been out there, get out there a few days before your hunt, get out there this weekend, whatever you can do to look at the country and soak it in a little bit. It can be pretty daunting. It's rough, it's steep. The elk have 4-foot long legs. They don't care about going up and down any of that. And so it's a good idea to get out there. We have in our postseason survey of our elk hunters every year, those folks that scout do end up, if they've made at least one scouting trip, do end up with a higher success rate. Yeah. So, and that's probably my number one tip is get out there and look around.
That's interesting. Of course, I've never been drawn to hunt elk here in the state of Kentucky, but I didn't realize that on your My Profile, obviously it knows if you've been drawn for an elk tag.
Yep.
It actually walks you through your preparation and gives you tips throughout the year.
Yeah.
Man, that is great. That's good stuff. I'd like to see that for people who deer hunt as well one of these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It was something where, we want every elk hunter. We want 100% success from our elk hunters. Everything we can do to, we tried to take a lot of the questions that we got on the phone into our info center that came to an elk biologist and put them in a webinar format or in a written format where it's always there.
Yeah,
for your
that's
reference.
fantastic because it seems like I get a lot of the same questions. As soon as that elk draw takes place, I'm going to get some phone calls saying,
Guaranteed.
"Hey, you're not going to believe this. I got elk hunt. What zone do I need to put in for? Or you know, what do I need to do next? What's a good gun caliber? And when do I start getting in shape? And what type of boots do I need to wear?
We covered all that.
All of that stuff.
Yep.
Good.
Hours worth.
That's great. I need to go check that out myself. All right. Next question. Is from Doug Roush. What age class of does are best to harvest?
That's a good. There's some different trends of thought on that one. Basically, any, if you're thinking purely about making Boone and Crockett bucks, any doe could make that. It could be the youngest one. A big component. So for every Boone and Crockett buck back here on the wall, half of its DNA came from the doe. And that's an often overlooked idea.
Yeah.
So she's got to have great genetics. She's got to be able to raise that fawn and to kickstart that fawn for it to truly express all of its, that buck fawn, for it to express its genetic potential. So there's really no good answer, to that in terms of selecting for trying to select for more trophy bucks or something. My rule of thumb as a person that likes to eat deer is that yearling doe is a great one. Bigger than a fawn, but not, still tender. That's always been what I consider a trophy doe.
I'll tell you what, that 80 to 90 pound field dress doe is usually, a year and a half old, in that range. It doesn't get much better.
No,
than that,
it doesn't.
I mean, that's about. It's enough to fool with, and it's enough to get plenty out of, but yet still very, very tender.
Exactly.
Next question is from Boo Smith. Is it correct that people under 15 can use a crossbow during olive archery season? So we talked about this one more time. Officer Martinez, give us that answer.
Yeah, it's legal for a 15-year-old to use a crossbow during archery.
Michael Morrison, he's got a question about migratory birds. He wants to know if his sportsman's license covers the migratory bird permit, specifically for doves.
Yeah, so including the sportsman's license is all the licenses and permits that really you need to hunt almost anything in the state of Kentucky, except those special permitted bigger game animals. Your migratory bird permit is part of that.
I'll tell you what, with dove season right around the corner, so your migratory bird permit, you're going to need that. Also, the
hip survey.
The overlooked aspect is that hip survey, which takes a few seconds to fill out. If you didn't hunt migratory birds or doves last year, it takes literally one question, I think. But a person that says, man, I've already printed out my license, I'm ready to go, what else can they do if they go online and take that survey?
Yeah, so they can either go online and take that survey, and once they get that confirmation number, they can write it on their license, or there's always the option to reprint the license, and that hip survey will be on the license then.
And that number will be on there, because that's one of the first things you're going to be looking for, right, when you're out in the field, is you're going to be checking, hey, dove season comes in tomorrow, so get that shotgun out, make sure that plug is in there, right? You want to check that out. Make sure you got your license, your migratory bird, and fill out that hip survey, because those are the things that can accidentally get you in trouble, right? Now, you made a comment a while ago, if a person is going to duck hunt later on in the year, they will need to get a waterfowl stamp.
Yes.
But as far as hunting doves and here in the state of Kentucky, migratory bird permit and your hunting license, you're good to go, right?
Yep.
And your hip survey.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll also add too, there are some public land areas we have in the state in which you have to have steel shot. So make sure to check out the Dove Guide and
Very
make sure
good
that
point.
you're not packing in lead when you need steel.
Very good point. Yeah, if you make sure if you're going on a WMA or you're hunting an area that they may have some waterfowl hunting, you want to make sure that they require steel shot. So make sure that you're checking that out. If you got plans to dove hunt, check out that wildlife management area and make sure that it is legal to use lead shot there. Next question is from Joe Jones. He wants to know if he can hunt a cornfield for turkey. He wants to know if that's bait. In the springtime, it's not a big issue because you're not going to have any corn up anyhow. But there is a overlooked wintertime. It's in December, I think, is when that turkey season comes in. If for whatever reason it hasn't been cut, is that legal to hunt that? What's the question there? Or what's the answer there?
So it's not considered bait if it's a bona fide agriculture.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so if it's a uncut cornfield and turkeys happen to be come to it, that's not considered baiting, right?
Correct.
Okay. Next question from Ronnie Brock. How is our quail and grouse population this year? Any updates from our quail or grouse?
Yeah, so again, with our quail population, we're seeing kind of our cyclical peak in the state. And so we can expect it to be, if you hunted last year, it's probably as good or maybe a little bit better out there across the Commonwealth for quail. For grouse, we're kind of at a pretty low spot for grouse. We've been trying to, we actually had a grouse plan generated about 4 or 5 years ago to try to get at, again, habitat. We talk so much about habitat, and it's really important for grouse. Grouse require early successional habitat, early forest successional habitat, so a bunch of little trees about the size of your arm all over the place, right? And so again, historically, we had land management practices like mining and other things like that produced a lot of this early successional habitat. Now we don't have much of that. We have a lot of older forests out there that's not as suitable for grouse. And so unfortunately, we have very few grouse in the state, and they're all pretty much in East Kentucky.
If you look at where people hunt grouse, it's the mountains, it's Eastern Kentucky, it's Daniel Boone National Forest, it's areas where you walk through the woods, it's all big high canopy, old growth forest, right?
Right, and that's not as suitable as it was in the past when the Forest Service was cutting timber on those federally owned properties. So they've pretty much since stopped cutting, which from a grouse standpoint and a suite of other wildlife species, cutting is good. So cutting trees is really good for those animals, and it mimicked historic disturbance factors like tornadoes or bison traces and stuff like that, Native Americans burning, things like that. And so there's some things that over the course of history, at least the last 40 or 50 years, we kind of thought of cutting trees as bad, but in reality, it was a thing that perpetuated some of these animals that needed that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, grouse are going down and down, and they're very limited. It's difficult to find pockets of suitable habitat anymore.
Yeah. Next question is from Spencer Taylor. How long do you have to telecheck your deer after your harvest?
So you have until midnight the night it was harvested, unless you're going to go ahead and start processing it. Once you start processing that deer, it needs to be telechecked in prior to.
Okay, so you got till midnight of the day of the harvest, and unless you started processing, and you need to do that prior to.
Yes.
Do we have a new app out for checking? Is there an app now for telechecking animals?
I don't think so, but you can do it online on your phone.
Online?
Most people with an iPhone or something, you can go through my profile there, or use our call-in system.
Okay, so call in. You call in, it's automated, or you can do it through your iPhone, right?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
The last few seasons, I've been doing that on my phone. I mean, it pops up on, it's like a mobile-ready website, essentially. So when it comes up, it looks like an app. It really does. And I've done that several times just in the woods, I mean, it's where you have service. It's really nice.
And would just generate a number, and you just screenshot that number, and you got that right there?
Yep.
Very, very nice. If you're not planning on doing that, you still need to plan on taking a pen into the woods for telechecking. That's or filling out a harvest log, right? That's probably one of the things that people forget the most. So if you're getting ready to go into the woods and you harvest an animal, before the telechecking, you have to fill out a harvest log, correct?
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about what's on that piece of paper.
The harvest log includes the game itself, the gender, the county it was taken, and the date.
Okay, so you need to do that right there before you start moving the animal. That's something you need to fill that piece of paper out, and it's on the back of your license,
yeah,
right?
If you print your license out, it's on there, or if you don't print your license out, a lot of people screenshot their licenses now, so they're on their phone. You can take like an index card or a piece of paper, but every time you go out in the field, you need to keep that piece of paper with you.
All right. Nathan Pennington, why do does stand up on their feet to try to kick at each other? He said he's seen this happen quite a few times.
Yeah.
Hey, I've seen it's pretty interesting. You watch a deer do this.
Absolutely. And then when video trail cameras came along, you see a lot more of it. It seems like everybody thinks the bucks fighting, but the does, there's a lot of competition, and it goes back to there's competition for that resource. So if you've got your trail camera over a corn pile or something, they're not all going to come in there and be friendly about it. They want that for themselves, and want that for their fawn to allow them to grow better and make it through the winter. And there's definitely some competition there.
I'll tell you what, it can get pretty fierce too, can't it?
Yeah.
You see those does stand up on their back hooves and start swinging front hooves at one another. You don't want to be on the bad end of that, do you?
No, absolutely.
Now, do cow elk do that too? I've never seen it.
Yeah, their kind of system is a little bit different, where they're in these larger, more connected family groups.
Yeah.
There's some competition, but it's not like two does over a corn pile. Now the lead cow in a cow elk herd keeps everybody straight. That's kind of like grandma slapping you with the ruler or something. She's going to keep everybody in line, but yet they're in it together.
Gotcha.
More so than two random does from either side of the farm meeting at a corn pile.
All right. Next question. It's from Cody Angel. Wants to know how the deer harvest numbers last year compared to others since COVID caused more hunting pressure.
Yeah.
COVID definitely did cause more hunting pressure. What were the numbers like?
Yeah, it got people out there for sure, and really coming off, we had a really good season in 2015, and we've sort of come down from that a little bit, but been stable. Mm-hmm. So numbers were very much on par with everything from 2016 on. Not really much discernible difference in that. So I was expecting to, when the numbers finally came in, for them to be much higher, but they were about on par.
Okay.
I think by the time deer season came in, we'd sort of rolled into COVID. I know some people that had industrial jobs that were off all of turkey season, but I know they were probably back to work before deer season rolled in.
And a lot of it comes back to the conversation we were having earlier. Hunters still, given the X amount of time off, they're not going to go out and kill 5, 6, 7. Most hunters. Now, some people may say, hey, you know what? I'm trying to live more lean. I want more organic meat. So they may say, hey, I'm going to take 3 or 4. But most people, given, instead of 5 days to hunt this year, you give them 30.
Yeah.
They're probably still going to take two deer or 1 deer, right?
Absolutely.
That's just
absolutely. Yeah. Our number of deer per successful hunter didn't go up at all this year. So it's about the same.
Gotcha. All right, next question is from Caleb Hall. Would like to take his wife hunting this year, but she doesn't have her orange card. And he wants to know about how you can go about that and see if she can hunt this fall. You want to take that? You know about the hunter orange card?
So I'm pretty sure they're still doing the courses online because of COVID. She doesn't need one as long as she's just sitting there observing. She doesn't need her license, permit, hunter education, as long as she's strictly there to observe and take in what hunting is.
Yep.
So there is if she's never done this before, there is a one-time, 1-year hunter exemption that she can also take, right? If she wants to actively participate and buy a hunting license and hunt, she can also do her 1-year exemption. Outside of that, she probably needs to take the hunter safety course, right?
Yep.
Now, it also depends on, it's a tough question, Caleb. You may have to ask your wife how old she is, because there's a particular date that if you're born before, you're not required to take it. I happen to know that is, I think it's December the 31st of 1974 maybe, or something like that. It's somewhere in that. If you're 46, 47 years old or older, you're probably going to be in the situation you're not going to need that. If your wife's younger than that, there is a 1-year exemption that she can fill that out, or she needs to go ahead and start pursuing that hunter orange card, which starts out online. She can start right there.
And that permit is free again this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the permit is free.
Yeah, the 12-month exemption.
Okay, there you go. Next question is from Lee Campbell. If you harvest a bear, do you take it to the check station, or can you just call that in?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes to both of those. So it'll be the exact same as a deer. When you walk up to that bear, you got to fill your harvest log out and telecheck it if you can. But every bear has to be physically checked by our biologists. So you can call our info center line, so 800-858-1549. And any time during the bear season, there's a recording. It'll usually be my voice, and we'll give you some phone numbers for a couple biologists across the bear zone. Pick the one closest to them, call them, and arrange to have a check. So we have some check stations that are in place during bear season, but then we'll also happily meet you, whether it's on the way to your house or we meet you at an intersection off the interstate, something like that. We're going to try to make it as easy as we can on the hunters. But they both have to be telechecked and physically checked by our biologists.
Okay.
And we will make sure that you've telechecked it prior to leaving us.
Okay. Okay.
So,
What are biologists looking for on bears right now? I mean, I'm sure when you guys are physically, when you want to put hands on an animal, it's because we're taking some DNA samples or doing something. I'm sure there's some biological material we're looking for.
Absolutely. It's a number of things. So we've got a big bear research project going on where we're actively tagging cubs with basically pet microchips. So we're going to scan your bear with a weird wand and look for that microchip. A lot of our adult bears that we've caught are going to be tagged and/or radio collared. So we'll get that equipment back, take those numbers down. Anytime we catch a bear, we also tattoo its inner lip. So we're going to be strangely looking at its cheek to see if we can see a tattoo. And then, of course, just body metrics, weight, length, that kind of stuff. And then the number one most important reason is we're pulling a tooth for age at harvest. That's a big component to our bear model, our population models, is at what age are these bears getting removed from the population.
Okay. So a lot of potential good, useful information that's being pulled.
Absolutely.
All right. Corey here wants to know, in your opinion, what is the best way for me to introduce his daughter to hunting? She's 11. So this is a new hunter, young female, 11 years old, interested in getting into hunting. What would you guys recommend?
I'm gonna always suggest small game. I mean, that's how I came up. You know, squirrel was first, and then maybe rabbit was second, and went to a dove shoot. More and more, I see, young kids going straight to deer, and I feel like they're missing out on a lot of fun. And then, squirrel hunting's a low pressure. I'm going Saturday morning. It's a low pressure hunt. Just going to go out and take a stroll and see what I can get. And I think it really teaches you how.
Yeah.
You know.
Robin, what do you think? What do you see out there in the field? What do you see as far as people introducing kids to the outdoors?
I mainly see people taking their children deer hunting, the bigger game, deer and turkey. It would be nice to check some of the smaller youth doing small game hunting. I think it opens a lot of opportunities for them, a lot more experiences. I just say get out there and do it with them.
Yeah, just make time and get out there and spend some time. You know what? Get them to the range or in the backyard. Let them shoot some beforehand. Yep. That's the thing about deer hunting. I completely agree with you, John. Getting a kid out there and putting them in a deer stand, and they may hunt 2 or 3 or 4 days before they get a shot, is probably not the most engaging way to get a youth involved in the outdoors. You take a person out. I can tell you this, I know when my dad took me squirrel hunting, I didn't care what the cost of ammunition was. If we walked 2 or 3 hours and never got a chance at a squirrel, we were going to pick something up and find a way to pull the trigger. How many times you see a person with a high-powered rifle out in the deer woods going, well, deer didn't come by, let's just shoot off a couple shots here. It's just, you talk about low pressure.
Absolutely.
If you get a squirrel or two, you get a squirrel, that's great. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. So.
Yep.
Take them out there and get them started into any type of small game. And man, take them out there when there's a dog present, because kids adults love watching dogs work. So that's a really good way to get kids involved.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I completely agree. And too, our squirrel season is one of the longest game seasons we have to harvest animals in Kentucky. It starts in August, ends in February. So again, very low pressure if you can't get to it, in the early season, maybe shoot out in the fall. It's nice to get out, again, honing those woodsman skills. And also one thing that I think about sometimes, and I've introduced a few people to hunting and stuff like that, and one thing is, harvesting game, is not for everybody, and that's true. And some people enjoy doing that, and sometimes they enjoy it for part of their life and then not for the rest of their life. But, harvesting a squirrel is a little bit different than harvesting a rabbit, which is different than harvesting a larger animal in through time. And so I think that, to try not to put people off that or to test how they might enjoy something like that, have them harvest a small game animal, a dove or a squirrel or something. Start small and then build up to that larger turkey or deer or something like that.
Man, you talk about learning how to walk through the woods and woodsmanships. I mean, 90% of the kids that go on their first deer hunt are going to go right to a stand or a blind that someone else has picked out for them over a spot that they think that's going to be good. That kid's going to go sit in there, and they're going to sit there for a couple of hours. There's really no decisions being made by that youth hunter. You go into the woods, and you're walking through the woods real slow and you're looking for what are these squirrels eating, what are they feeding on, what other food sources might be in. You're looking long ranges out. How am I going to get to that squirrel? There's it's a lot more engagement with the wildlife and making those decisions, gaining that confidence in the woods. That's where you learn to hunt, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Taking a kid out and going, this is a good spot, son, I promise you this is where you want to be, or daughter, sit right here, the deer are going to come from this way right here, just stay till they come here. May work out, but you may burn a kid out that way too.
Yep.
So I completely agree with the small game. Next question is from Timmy Standard. He wants to know what the bear population is doing. Is it growing, staying the same, or are they expanding their range?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay.
So when you look at our county zones, so we were trying to manage for about zero growth in, say, Bell, Letcher, and Harlan County. That's really ideal. So those are your Zone 1 counties. Outside of that, we're definitely seeing growth and definitely seeing expansion.
Okay.
So, and we'll have some fresh bear regs for 2022, ideally, that will increase the hunter opportunity.
Okay.
For sure.
So how many counties are open to bear hunting right
I
now?
think we've got 47 right now.
Okay, 47 counties. And do you think we have resident bears that are living year-long outside of that 47 counties?
Definitely not outside, and some kind of the the western and northern border of that. Some of those counties probably not, but definitely bears in those counties during the fall.
Okay. Next question is from Ronnie Brock. Wants to know, with technology consistently advancing, do you see the opportunity for photos to be used for check-in game stations?
It's an interesting thing. So we have thought about, and some folks, we're going to test it on some folks probably this fall on our online telecheck, is getting them to look and help us age that deer. So one component in our deer model is doe age. Anybody that's killed a buck here in the last couple of years, we ask for that antler spread metric. So we ask you, I think it's above 11 or below 11, and that helps us age those bucks. It's a really good predictor of yearling bucks to adult bucks. We need the same thing for does, and they don't grow antlers. We're trying to figure out a good way for hunters to help us collect that data. So right now our biologists are collecting it. While they're sampling for CWD and going to processors, they're collecting that for us. So you may see something in the future where you could submit a photo and help us get the age on that deer.
Okay,
So
that's very cool. Hey, who knows where technology is going to take us, right?
Exactly.
Speaking of technology, the next question is from Ronnie Brock. Wants to know, during the night season for coyotes, is using a thermal scope legal to use? I know nighttime coyote hunting is something that's growing. I myself have never used a thermal scope. I have used I'm sure for some of the elk stuff, you've probably looked through some thermal scopes. Yeah,
absolutely. And they are. So we've got our regs weren't passed before the hunting guide got printed, but thermals, night vision, spotlight is legal, and that'll open up on December 1.
Okay.
This fall.
Okay. All right. Mark Wang, has there been any talk to shortening the firearm season to promote the size class of bucks in Kentucky, similar to Illinois, Ohio, and Iowa?
Yeah, they definitely have a little bit shorter season up there. Ours coincides with the rut. We're not in talks about that right now, but it's something we could consider with input from the folks out there hunting. That's not necessarily the end all to increasing size. I mean, to a certain extent, limiting hunter opportunity should increase that size, but it's not the only way to do it.
So these other states that he's referencing here, Illinois, Ohio, and Iowa, have they been on the 1 buck system for quite some time as well, or?
Yeah, I think they're on 1 buck, but they've also got a little bit shorter season, and I know Illinois and Ohio sort of have 2 different chunks of their season. Instead of where we've got 16 days in a row for our gun season, they might have a 5-day early and a 5-day later.
Okay.
Just a different way to do things.
I'll tell you what, archery season is in so long, and we talked about crossbows. It's a great way to get in and get involved into deer hunting. And also now we've got 2 muzzleloader seasons, right?
Yeah.
We got a 2-day muzzleloader weekend and then a week for muzzleloader. That is also another opportunity that if that period of time, that 16-day stretch in November doesn't fit your calendar, there are some additional opportunities out there.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
I'll tell you one thing, this time of year for me, I don't know about you guys, but July and August are probably here in Kentucky my least favorite 2 months. The fishing's the toughest. The hunting it's too hot for it. man, with these temperatures slowly starting to creep down and getting a little cooler at nights, I'm like chomping at the bit. I'm ready for fall to get here. It's my favorite time of year. A new hunting opportunity seems like it opens up every week right now. So I'll tell you what, if you like the outdoors here in the state of Kentucky, the best time of year, in my opinion, is right around the corner.
Yeah.
Last question here we have from Joe Jones, who wants to know if he can just buy a bear permit, or if he has to, or can he go out and hunt bear on that, or is there a special process to get drawn to hunt bear?
No drawing. So it's over the counter. So he just needs his regular hunting license and the bear permit. If he's running bears with dogs, he'll need the chase permit as well.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, like I said, the time of year, if you're an outdoors person here in the state of Kentucky, the fall is absolutely beautiful. There's hunting opportunities come around. Fishing's going to start getting better. I encourage you to get out there and participate. It's going to be a beautiful fall, and I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be out filming all kinds of new hunting and fishing opportunities and outdoor recreational opportunities throughout the state of Kentucky. Make sure that you tune in and watch what we're doing and get out there and enjoy yourself. Hopefully we got to your question and you got your answer. If not, make sure you reach out to our info center at 1-800-858-1549. Hey, next week, Kentucky Afield will be preempted. Make time to get out in the woods. Squirrel season is now in, dove season is now in, and the deer archery season opens on September the 4th.
If you hold a Kentucky hunting or fishing license, then you have helped make possible Kentucky's wildlife management areas. Places to hunt, fish, birdwatch, or just let your mind wander. With nearly 100 dotting the Commonwealth, put wildlife management areas in your sights and see more of what makes Kentucky's outdoors outstanding. Get all the info online at fw.ky.gov.